The new year is just around the corner. For some of us, it's a time of reflection. For some, it's a time of celebration. And for the rest of us, it's a feeling of, oh, thank God that's over. It's time to wipe the slate clean and start afresh next year. New Year's has a different meaning for all of us, and we express it very differently. For example, last year, my dad and I spent it attending a spiritual retreat. My mom celebrated it with family at home, and my brother was obviously out with his friends, not spending time with us. But what does New Year's mean for everybody else? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. Hello, everybody. My name is Lakshan, and I'm your host for this episode.
And I'm Goldie, and this is episode 15 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast.
In this episode, we're going to be exploring how each generation celebrates the New Year. We'll break this episode down into three segments. The first one being New Year traditions, the second one being New Year resolutions, you know what those are, and the third one being how each of these generations' perspective on the New Year differs. By the end of this episode, you'll know exactly why you find it so hard to get all the generations of your family under one roof for New Year's. Let's first start off by understanding the celebration traditions of each generation. Baby boomers go about celebrating their New Year's Eve by reflecting on how the past year went and by spending time with their family. And since they are the generation who came of age during a period of economic prosperity, you can expect them to be spending very lavishly on family gatherings. Then we have Gen X, who have more so of a low key vibe, probably because they're the generation who's weathered the most recessions and hence may tend to be more budget conscious. You can expect them to be spending it with casual get togethers, maybe like a barbecue of sorts, watching classic New Year's Eve movies, or just having a good conversation. Nostalgia is the theme that they typically go for. Then we have millennials who had grown up in a time of economic uncertainty. Uh, and because of that, they care a lot more about experiences than spending very lavishly. For them, it's all about creating moments that are both fun and social media worthy. I don't belong to that cohort per se, but that's how the rest of my cohort is. So you can think about things like themed celebrations or countdown boomerangs on Instagram stories. They find a way to combine tradition with the trendy. And lastly, we have Gen Z, who have turned this economic constraint into creativity. Expect them to be doing live stream countdowns, virtual parties, TikTok challenges, and low cost gatherings to maximize connection. They may be at a party, but they're also creating content to share with the rest of the world. Goldie, what are some traditions you've noticed about different generations celebrating New Year's Eve?
You're speaking to somebody who comes from the West, specifically Spain. I think we get the prize for all things big. No, all jokes aside, I was reflecting on every generation you spoke about and the way they equate New Year's in their lives. And, I want to say that, again, coming back to where I've been born and raised, there's this synonymous feeling of cheer and a sense of wanting to count down to midnight in Spain. That's been, let's call it a tradition, because it is a tradition. We actually eat 12 grapes before the clock strikes midnight. And every grape that you eat before the clock strikes midnight is meant to be like the countdown to New Year's, the next New Year. And I know that you're probably thinking, what a strange tradition. And it is for the most part of the world, for the rest of the world that, think about it. But it's so ingrained in us since we were born, literally. The TV is, privy to this, that media on all levels. If you're in Spain, you can't miss this tradition. And so what happens is, whether you're a boomer or you're a Gen X or you're a Gen Z, you are essentially eating these grapes just before midnight strikes, wherever you are in the country. So I think when you ask me about how generations are celebrating New Year's, they may be doing it by, being a Gen Z or an Alpha doing it via TikTok and showing off their grapes, or it could be a boomer sitting and proudly around his or her family doing the same thing. And then you have someone like me who has made her own tradition. And what I do is I eat a different grape for a different special person in my life. So I'm thinking of 12 different people in 12 seconds. And that's something that I have done for years and years. And that's where the nostalgia comes in for the, typically Gen X that I am. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think New Year's Eve for us is one of the most special times of the entire year. And unless you're not born and raised here and you have to enter our world, you think we are a little bit crazy. We take New Year's Eve very seriously. And when you said to me that last year all four members of your family were in different places, I found that very bizarre. Because for us, it's absolutely the opposite. We have to make sure that all four members are actually in the same room eating these grapes together. To start the new year together.
That's such an interesting tradition. I presume it's 12 grapes for each month of the year. Is that how it works?
It's basically the countdown to midnight. And so it's no, not really for them each month. It's just about counting down to 12. So it's when the clock strikes midnight and it's 12 o'clock, right? So we have 12 grapes. And it's become so commercial that they're even sold in the form of a clock. So you have, 12, 1, 2, 3. And so it's easy to pick off the little tray and various creative ways that you can have these grapes, whether it's in a glass or in a tray or in a clock shaped, device, whatever. So I think it's just that. I don't even really understand why grapes and why not anything else. I mean, why not popcorn? It's so much easier. But yeah, we make sure they're seedless though, so we don't have any accidents happening. Yeah.
That's a very very unique tradition. It's not something that I can't see it happening here. I don't know if it happens anywhere else. But since we are on the topic of traditions, there is one other tradition I'd like all of us to start. It's this tradition of liking this episode or rating it 5 stars, leaving us a review, and subscribing to us on YouTube, Spotify, or any other platform you're tuning in from. Let's make it a tradition to do it every episode. How does that sound, Lily?
Oh, it sounds fantastic. I'm all about traditions.
All right, so now we move on from the tradition aspect of New Year's and we move on to the resolutions aspect. I think a lot of people equate New Year's with New Year's resolution. And there are some interesting findings I have, Goldie, with respect to this. So, the way that boomers typically go about setting resolutions is that their resolutions tend to be about their personal well-being, health, wellness, and things of that nature, spirituality, or anything that gives them a sense of connection, and family. There's a report which says that about 40% of boomers usually resolve to spend more time with their loved ones and give back to their community. Now let's move on to your generation, Gen X. According to LinkedIn, there's a report that they conducted. About 2/3 of Gen Xers, that means you take 3 people, out of them, 2 of them, set resolutions that are centered around work life balance. So, this is with respect to how they juggle their family, their work, and have time for themselves. It's all about how can we simplify our lives further. Those are the kind of resolutions they go about having. And then there is the millennials. And according to a report from Statista, about 70% of millennials set personal or professional development based resolutions. And then we have Gen Z, everybody's favorite, where about 3/4 of them, 76% is what it says, but about, say, 3/4 of Gen Z, according to a Deloitte survey, prioritize mental health and personal authenticity when it comes to setting their resolutions. And of course, needless to say, they also have social causes based resolutions as well. So, Goldie, you, as someone who's coached so many generations from so many countries all over the world at so many different points of time over the calendar year. What have you noticed when it comes to the types of goals that people come to you with around, say, the New Year time?
I think I want to use a metaphor here, which I've just thought of. As you were speaking about the different generations and, of course, where they are in their lives. And I've seen this actually now that I'm reflecting back on some of the clients I've, started the year with, or even just sort of midway, there's always someone who's got a resolution to fulfill. If it's a boomer, I generally find that they're seeking to slow down in their lives, and they're really just striving to push back a little bit and pedal down and not accelerate as much, because their mind and priority is more on their health, as you quite rightly said. So then, I would say they're kind of the generation that are seeking to slow down. When it comes to Gen X, for them, again, it's very similar to what you've said, this work life balance. And so, what I notice in them is they're trying to maintain momentum. They find themselves often speeding up in certain projects or situations of life, but they're consciously striving to maintain momentum. So, they're kind of a bit like on cruise control, or at least aiming to get there. And I can speak for myself here too. You're not wanting to take any more speed than what you have, because it's a feeling of, I've been there, I've done that. I want to enjoy the pace I'm at right now. Now, when it comes to millennials, I often find them in a place where they've paced up, but they don't quite know where to go next. And I find them wanting to speed and get that speed going. And I encourage them to do it, because they have the tools, they've got that minimum experience on their backs. They need to take more risks. So I would say millennials need to speed up. And I think this usually helps them, because they're in their prime, aren't they? They're kind of just, the juice is ready to be kind of given. And they've probably all of them finished their masters or higher education with some little or medium, work experience. Some are starting their families as well at that point. Hence, I feel that speeding up is very accurate for millennials. And finally, as our favorite, Gen Z, I always find that they want to run, but I'm finding that what would help them more is to find their pace, because they are so energetic. They have so much inside of them that they can burn out too quickly. And so this is why mental health is such a big topic for them. So find your pace, and it's about building your pace. In the same way that Gen X are maintaining momentum, Gen Z have to build up the pace. So they have to find that sweet spot. And then from there, they can speed up. So it all sounded a bit like a race, like a marathon almost, where you're in every little different phase of your life, ending at boomers, essentially, right? Where you're just like, okay, right, I've done the race now. I need to slow down. I can't stop entirely, because that's not healthy either, but I just want to slow down and, have a good stroll or walk in the mountains. That's what I'm seeing.
I think the Gen X and millennial aspect, I see it fairly frequently, because in the sense that when it comes to Gen X, maybe that's all the more reason why I see a lot of them starting to be a little more assertive with their boundaries and say, hey, I can't do this, or I'm going to let go of this thing, say no to certain things, because I don't have the bandwidth, or I have enough bandwidth just for these three things or these few things. I don't want to take up anything more. It's going to complicate my life, or it's not going to be enjoyable for me as an experience, right? And with what you said about millennials, I remember a conversation we had, I think when we were first starting out discussions about our podcast sometime in April, May, something like that. And I was telling you about how I'm struggling to find my feet. It's like things just keep coming my way. I'm not able to put my feet on the ground and keep it there for a while. And you were saying that's something that you're seeing with a lot of people my age. I remember this portion of that conversation quite distinctly. So it's interesting. It's almost come full circle. Before the podcast
Mm.
we spoke about this, and now end of the year we're speaking about it again.
Yeah, yeah. It's not something I consciously think about, if I'm honest. But when we get into the pots and pans of generational dialogue, it really just comes back to you. And essentially, as we speak, I'm reflecting on the sessions I've had this morning with various individuals. And, some of them are actually, there was one boomer, there was two millennials, and there was one who was a Gen Z. So in the span of one morning, I have actually identified these very momentums that I have spoken to you about, and they may be coming up in different contexts in their lives. They're all very different people, but somehow I've noticed sort of a parallel in the same sort of theory that I've presented to you in terms of their personal contexts.
And I really appreciate you for sharing what you feel is the reason behind uh, the kind of goals that each of them are setting, because that very neatly takes us into the last segment of this episode, which is on what are the different perspectives that each generation has with respect to New Year. So let's start off with boomers and how they view this time of year as a time for gratitude and hope. They see the new year as a chance to reflect and connect and really make the most out of life. Gen Xers often see it as a time to recalibrate and reset, setting realistic goals and taking a practical approach to the year ahead. And I think it ties in with what you had said earlier about them wanting to, keep their momentum going, maintain cruise control,
Mm.
make it realistic, the goals that they set, and have a very practical way of going about what comes up next year, right? And then we have millennials whose approach to New Year's is in the perspective of approaching it as an opportunity for reinvention. So they're all about wanting to reinvent themselves, step into their best versions of themselves, chase their dreams, create a life that they love. And there is some data to back this up, which says that about 67% of millennials, that's about two-thirds of millennials, do view the new year as a way to reinvent themselves and become a different, more ideal version of the person they want to be. And then finally, we have again everybody's favorite Gen Z. For them, the new year is less about looking back and a lot more about looking forward. I love that. So they are constantly looking to embrace change because that's what they see all the time almost. And they are all about championing social causes. And they look at the new year as a blank canvas to express themselves and really make an impact. So interestingly, I'm noticing that the way every generation views the new year is also the way they tend to view life in general. That's an observation that I'm having, Goldie. What are you observing?
Um, I'm going to go back to something you said, which was about Gen X, no, millennials, uh, approaching the new year as a reinvention and to actually step into the chance to become their best selves. So this word best self is something that I want to pick up on, because if you go back up to boomers, what are they talking about here? They're talking about a chance to reflect and show gratitude and be hopeful, but for what? For who they are, right? For their self. Because boomers have reached that peak of their best self. They know exactly who they are with all the life experience that they've had, the achievements that they've accomplished, even the relationships they've had, whether it's as partners, parents, some are grandparents even. So they pretty much know, okay, this is the best version of me, and I'm so grateful to be who I am. And may I be blessed to continue to be this, whoever I am. Now, let's go down to Gen X. They also have seen streaks and shades and hues of who their best self can be in their best and their worst moments, because they're almost there. So what they're doing is, okay, you know what? as pragmatic as we are, and I'm always going to be an agent for this and own it. Uh, let me see what I can do to continue to be this best version of me. Is there anything that I need to modify? And so that's what I want to do in the new year. Just continue to be who I am, but refined and more seasoned, whether it is to just, I don't know, address certain health issues, or see my calendar and notice that I'm doing too much work. I need to cut down a little bit. But you already know where your best performance lies. So you're trying to kind of strive towards that. And coming down, well, millennials are probably there, but they still are discovering an even better version of themselves, which is why you say a moment for reinvention. So they've seen like a lot of what they have to give to the world, but they know that they're not quite there yet, which is why they still need to run a bit more and, maybe even fall and rise to sort of really discover their true potential, as we say in coaching. And of course, Gen Z have no idea who they are. They, hands down, they're still searching, they're still experimenting. They have to feel the need to do different things in order to actually understand, is this me or is it not me? Hence the social causes, embracing change, taking risks, even embodying somebody who is not even them. But they have to feel it in order to then shed layers. Okay, so it's all coming back to the self, really. And everything that we choose to do, all the choices we make, is related to what version do you feel in your skin and feel comfortable being.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. So it's like everybody views it differently, and it's all with respect to the self, no? As you said.
yeah,
And what you said about Gen Z, I really like it because it does tie in with the whole not looking back but looking forward thing, because there isn't much for them to look back at right now as they are. It's all about, okay, I'm here now. What can I become? What can I try? What can I experiment with? Who can I try to temporarily embody to see, okay, do I fit in this person's skin or not? Right?
absolutely. It's an exciting time of life. I think it's a wonderful time to be in. We've all been there, actually. It's just that thankfully we have this platform today where we're addressing it and bringing it more in the spotlight. But I'm sure you can feel, looking back, what you were at the age of 18, 19, to who you are becoming, because you haven't yet become, you're still becoming as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that very neatly brings us towards the end of this episode, where, I mean, the whole idea of this episode is to talk about how, irrespective of what generation you belong to, New Year's has a very special meaning for all of us. But at the very core of it, New Year's is just a time for all of us to pause, to reset, to celebrate in our own unique ways. What is celebration for me may not be celebration for you, and vice versa. And whether it is, say, raising a toast, setting a resolution, or making a TikTok, whatever it is, it's essentially a chance to connect with both yourself and with others. And that's how you actually mind the Gen Gap. Speaking of connecting with others, we would love it if you could show your connection to us by leaving a like on this episode, subscribing to the podcast, and sharing it with all your family, your friends, and your colleagues. After all, it is the sharing time of the year. And with that, we've come to the end of episode 15 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast. I've been your host, Lakshan.
And I've been your co-host, Goldie.
Thank you so much for tuning in all the way to the very end.
Muchas gracias.
Have a wonderfully happy new year, and we'll see you next year.
Feliz año nuevo. Nos vemos en el 2025.
Ooh, fancy. Right? Bye.